Hundreds of people in the valley say they are hearing voices in their heads.
Electronic harassment, synthetic telepathy, voice-to-skull technology. Chances are you haven't heard of these terms, but after searching the internet, I found dozens of websites dedicated to the phenomenon.
Gang stalking.
And gang stalking.
Gang stalking. Gang stalking. Gang stalking.
Gang stalking.
The covert crimes, the family says, include intense microwave radiation aimed at the house.
Incident reports from law enforcement tell the tale. Numerous break-ins at the address. Vandalism to her car, her motorcycle, her computer. Verbeff believes she's being targeted.
Everything. They just went through everything.
But sheriff's detectives had little to go on because the vandals, though often destructive, stole nothing. Even from her portable safe drilled into and torn apart, the contents, the jewelry, remained untouched. Verbeff says her troubles didn't start until she met these two men. One would become her ex-boyfriend, the other was his partner in a San Antonio pain clinic, Dr. John Hall.
Very first time I met him, we went to his house on the 4th of July, and he told me that because I was already there in his house, I would be the next victim that I was going to be stalked.
Verbeff found the doctor's prophecy to be correct. She suffered months of oddness.
Coming in through the front door, and I touch the doorknob, and it just falls into pieces.
Lights left on, doors open, furniture moved, her clothes dryer disassembled. Her friends say they noticed the strange happenings. They tell the I-Team they even witnessed a gas oven left turned on.
As soon as you walk in the house, you'd smell gas in the house. So the whole house smelled from gas. So immediately turned it off and opened up the doors, but I mean, that thing doesn't just turn on by itself. And it had been running for a good length of time.
Or the time Verbeff and a friend say they were stalked at a mall.
I saw him following us to several stores, and I would see the man close to us, looking at us.
The girls had the presence of mind to snap a photo with their phone. Verbeff says all these happenings culminated in an assault. The 39-year-old believes someone drugged the food in her home and returned later to rape her.
I know something happened to me because a woman knows.
She filed a report and was briefly hospitalized with signs of sexual assault. Dr. Hall says what Verbeff describes is known as gang stalking. Indeed, he writes about it in his book, A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America. Verbeff is not alone. Others in San Antonio have contacted the I-Team and described similar types of occurrences.
The urine arsenic is above normal. We shouldn't have arsenic.
Linda Johnson says someone poisoned her water supply with heavy metals in northwest San Antonio. Then there's her story about the bracelet that went missing, then reappeared. Police, she says, have stopped listening to her. And like Verbeff, she too believes she's been sexually assaulted, although she never filed a police report.
I've gone to doctors many times, and I've been to the Rape Crisis Center for counseling, yes.
Many of these so-called victims of what Hall describes as gang stalking meet up on the internet, finding comfort and information from others who say they too suffer from electronic stalking, mind control, and even rape. Loosely defined, gang stalking is where organized groups target and harass unwilling victims to the point of paranoia, leaving the victims to deal with skeptical family members and skeptical law enforcement.
This isn't stalking done by a former spouse or former boyfriend or someone that you know that's disgruntled at you, but stalking that's being done by total strangers in an organized fashion.
And some internet links take you here to the book mentioned earlier, written by Dr. John Hall.
The book is fact. It's not a book of fiction. What I've wrote about is an isolated story here in San Antonio.
Dr. Hall says it is a story about himself and the harassment and rapes his ex-girlfriends allegedly suffered beginning in 1996. Dr. Hall believes the people behind it are well-organized operatives using government satellite technology to terrorize him and other victims.
All voicing the same complaints: organized stalking, weird electronic disturbances going on in their homes. Most of the women are complaining of drugging and sexual assault. So it's a big national problem.
Verbeth bought the book, and what she read, she says, caused her stomach to turn, because within the chapters in the story, she found similarities to her own situation.
I pulled out the book and I started reading, and I'm like, oh my God, it's exactly what's happening.
It's like turning the pages of your own story.
Everything.
Remember the doors, windows, even the clothes dryer taken apart? Page 35, third paragraph, talks about reassembling appliances. The drugged food and rape? Page 52 talks of concealing rohypnol, the date rape drug, in drinks and food. The account in Hall's book is chilling, and the I-Team uncovered some truth to his story. San Antonio police reports indicate there was a rape reported in 2007 in the same quad of condos where one of Dr. Hall's girlfriends supposedly lived. San Antonio police say the condo rape remains under investigation. And Bexar County detectives say Verbeth's assault remains open as well. And although there are some interesting connections to Dr. Hall in the book, law enforcement won't and cannot say if Dr. Hall is even a person of interest. The I-Team thought the similarities were striking and asked him,
could you in fact be the person that's creating this mess for these women?
And that's actually one of the reasons why I got out of my ex-fiance's life, to make sure that they weren't victimizing her in order to get at me.
Dr. Hall says he's been targeted by the same groups. There's mention in the book of a conspiracy by the criminals and by fellow doctors. Dr. Hall says the Texas Medical Board retaliated against him for uncovering the gang stalking. The I-Team confirmed one local hospital suspended Dr. Hall's clinical privileges for 2 months in 2006. In 2007, the Texas Medical Board ordered 2 mental evaluations of Dr. Hall. The first came back normal, but a second evaluation found a probable delusional disorder and ordered psychiatric treatment. And in 2008, Hall's license was suspended, this time when he tested positive for cocaine. In the book, he explains the operatives drugged him with cocaine periodically. Dr. Hall's medical license has since been reinstated.
If you look nationwide, almost everyone that complains of this eventually gets sent to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrists don't look into the technology. They don't do any research into whether or not any of this is possible.
With his book published, Dr. Hall is taking his message nationally. He's appeared on cable TV shows.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hall.
Late night radio.
Our guest tonight, Dr. John Hall.
And even has his own radio program in the works.
There have been several people in my midst, obviously, that have been victimized, but if you look at it on a larger scale, it is a national problem as well.
Dr. Hall says the problem is gang stalking, seeking to victimize innocent women and sully his reputation for exposing them.
By the end of the 1950s, the CIA had created a plethora of programs that were designed to change the way humans think and behave. Eventually, these programs would also target the media, education, and even Hollywood.
So MKUltra is probably the most famous of the U.S. mind control programs. I mean, it's an iconic program, and it's been in movies galore. It's all about mind control. So what's interesting about MKUltra is, A, it was secret for many years. No one had any inkling that this was going on. And we're talking, look, some horrific, off-the-charts, like Frankenstein-type experiments. We're talking sensory deprivation experiments on unwilling and unwitting human subjects, some of them terminal, all right? Some of this stuff done at Edgewood Arsenal in New Jersey, and some of them done off American soil by the really, truly evil Dr. Ewan Cameron, formerly head of the World Psychiatric Association over at McGill University in Canada, where he did, in addition to lobotomies on women in menopause going because they were having anxiety, he did what he called psychic driving. This is all for the CIA. Lovely stuff here in the early 1960s. So in other words, the idea was he would somehow find a way of emptying their minds of unhealthy thoughts, however he determined that, and driving in thoughts that he thought were positive. Can you imagine how utterly sick this was? This was the head, one of the most prestigious psychiatrists in the world.
Now I know what it feels like to be God.
Operation Mockingbird is called. It's a whole project to infiltrate Central Intelligence Agency people into the media and to put out false stories and to suppress truthful stories and affect the news. And they undoubtedly do that in Hollywood. There's not any doubt of that.
You know, it's an interesting thing. When Richard Condon wrote The Manchurian Candidate in the late 50s, it was interesting because he was really focusing on the Chinese and the North Koreans. But I guarantee you, by the late 50s, the U.S. was so far ahead of the Chinese and North Koreans, and probably even the Russians, in what we would call brainwashing techniques. And I don't really know what Condon knew, but I suspect he knew quite a bit. Our intelligence community has just done all these things. And by the way, they did it with their own cache of imported Nazi scientists, courtesy of Project Paperclip, is that we only know about MKUltra by accident. This is how secrets do happen. They can go forever, sometimes beyond forever. The other thing about MKUltra is the whole point was to harness the human soul, the human mind.
And in fact, the American people acquiesce in that. They say, oh, well, you know, all's kind of fair in love and war. And, you know, and so that we've been in this big conflict with the Soviet Union and or now Iran or now, you know, the ultimate enemy of the weak, you know, kind of this Orwellian process of the national security state. They don't stop these things just because everybody finds out that it's horrible and they ought to stop it. They just say they stop it. There's a famous saying in Washington, D.C. that if an agency gets caught doing something awful, they'll change the room numbers on the rooms. And if it's really bad, they'll change the phone number. But they won't stop doing it.
You've got to control people's perception. You've got to keep them in the perceptual box. And that's what this matrix does. It's a hijacking of human sense of reality, a fake reality, which again, you see the descriptions of it in the ancient world. And we need to see through this and fast and realize that we've not just been had, we've not just been manipulated, we've not just been perceptually enslaved just a little bit.
The programs were developed to fool the human race through the use of planted stories and fake news. But what about technological advances?
One of the problems is that we have to become cognizant of what the capabilities are within the counterintelligence community and the intelligence community. And I remember in the early 90s meeting with a man who was in his 80s at that time. He's passed away since, who invented an electromagnetic system so that you could hook someone up to it, anybody, and they would be able to remote view through the electronic system, but interfacing with consciousness. Now, this guy said to me that that was also had been turned into not just a passive viewing system, but an active weapons system, where you could then turn it around and target people with experiences that are 100% real. One of the interesting ways he put it to me, he says, look, he said, Dr. Greer, if we want to target you so you have a conversation with your personal God, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, whoever, you'll believe it. You'll think it's real. And you will absolutely will pass a lie detector test that it is real. It is that good. Now that was 1956. So extrapolate into the 70s, the 90s now, what those capabilities are. Now this sounds like an urban myth. It is not. And by the way, the only thing that Wernher von Braun warned about as being more dangerous than this so-called Project Bluebeam or false flag hoaxing an alien attack was the existence of these technologies in the hands of the worst kinds of people and that they were being abused.
Aaron Alexis, we know, had violent outbursts, run-ins with the police, and police now say he also heard voices.
21-year-old Nicole Natchman is not talking about the murders of her mother, Marion Denis, or her stepfather, Robert Denis, both gunned down last Thursday night. But this arrest affidavit speaking volumes tonight. According to deputies, the FSU student began hearing voices on campus telling her to kill her parents.
John, police say 26-year-old Richard Rojas said he was hearing voices and expected to die. Authorities say he was likely attempting suicide by cop. Rojas had been discharged from the Navy following disciplinary problems and had multiple prior arrests for driving while intoxicated. Rojas is accused of mowing down people in Times Square for 3 blocks before he was stopped by a row of steel barriers.
Officials say Esteban Santiago was undergoing treatment for mental health problems, complaining that he was hearing voices. They say a few months ago he walked into the FBI's office in Anchorage, complaining that the CIA was forcing him to join ISIS. Officials say local police were called and he went voluntarily to a mental health facility for treatment.
22-year-old Klein Thaxton believed he was hearing 3 voices inside his head the day he walked into this downtown office tower. One of them he calls the Crow.
The Crow, he said, talk to him.
Thaxton's lawyer revealed that new detail to us this morning after a preliminary hearing in the case.
Voices were telling him to cause some damage, cause some harm to someone. And he kept telling the voices, no, no, no.
Thaxton was arrested almost a month ago after police say he entered the office of Charles Breitzman on the 16th floor of 3 Gateway Center and held Breitzman hostage at knife point.
He was hearing 2 different voices. A lot of people don't know that.
Driven by voices, that's the claim in an investigation by the Boston Globe about accused Boston Marathon bomber Tamerlan Tsarnaev. Brian Todd is joining us right now. Brian, the report suggests he was hearing voices, that he may have had a mental illness. What's going on?
Now that Maisa Alvarez has gone before a judge, her arrest report is public and sheds new light on her state of mind. The affidavit says Alvarez confessed that voices told her to kill her son.
In an interview with investigators, she first denied setting the fire and then said it was accidental. But when asked again, she said the house was, quote, filled with demons, and she began hearing voices telling her to carry out her mission. She admitted to lighting paper coffee strainers on fire, setting them on furniture, and then locking the door and walking away.
Police say a 20-year-old suspect took 3 bank employees hostage yesterday. He released one, but after more than 12 hours, he shot the other 2, killing one and leaving the other in critical condition. That's when police moved in and they killed him. Now we're learning more about the suspect. Police say he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and believe something had been implanted in his head.
For a harassment call. According to the police report, the man we now know is the Navy Yard shooter said people were following him. He was hearing voices and they were putting vibrations in his body to keep him awake.
Law enforcement sources tell ABC News the 19-year-old gunman told investigators he heard voices in his head directing him to conduct the attack.
Take a look at these pictures here. Scroll down a little bit. There's a bigger picture further down. It's a diagram, and it starts talking about electromagnetic effects on the human body. And it talks about psychoelectric weapons. Yeah, we've got, openly, Barack Obama spent $200 million on his brain project with DARPA. Yeah, let's see if we can hack into people's brains. Let's see if we can take away memories or implant false memories. And let's see if we can do it wirelessly. That's their big push right now. They don't want to have to take you in and jack into the back of your neck like the Matrix or do an operation and stick a probe into your head. No, they want to be able to do it remotely, wirelessly, without your perception. And so when you look at this diagram, they've got a human body there. And here's some of the creepy things they've got pointing at it. One of them, forced memory blanking and induced erroneous actions. Another one, forced manipulation of airways, including externally controlled forced speech. They can make you say stuff that you don't want to say. Forced nudging of arm during delicate or messy work, causing injury or spills. Forced precision manipulation of hands, sometimes synced to the forced walking visions. They give you microwave hearing. So you can hear voices. Transparent eyelids. I don't know what that is. Transparent eyelids? Artificial tinnitus, ringing in your ears. All this stuff. They're bragging about how they can do this. They call it the psychoelectronic weapon effects. And they got a little footnote down there. It said, the first unclassified successful transmission of the human voice directly into the skull of a living person was performed by Dr. Joseph Sharp of the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research in 1974. Well, that's the first unclassified successful thing. Now, they've had classified stuff before that. And as I pointed out before, Michael Aquino, a creepy figure in and of himself. He kind of looks like Eddie Munster, even more so than Paul Ryan. Far more so than Paul Ryan, actually.
Talking to Dr. Aquino and his wife, you are a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army.
Correct.
Now, and how does the Army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
The Army has known about my religion for the entire span of my Army career, which began in 1968. And there was a reasonable amount of curiosity, as there has been all the way along, with what exactly is this strange and unusual thing. And I've talked about it in much the same way that I've talked here today on your show about it. And other than that, the Army has paid very little attention to it, the same as it would to anybody who was, say, a follower of Hinduism or of Buddhism or any other slightly unusual religion today.
And this is a guy who openly went on the Oprah Winfrey Show talking about how he was a Satanist. He had the Temple of Set in California and things like that. But he was somebody who worked for the NSA. And he had no problem going on with all of his satanic cult stuff on the Oprah Winfrey Show. He was alleged to have committed child abuse, alleged pedophile at the Presidio in California, the military base there. He escaped prostitution. He escaped prosecution, and because he's connected with people. Again, he worked for the NSA, and he wrote a book in 1980 called Mind War. And in that book, he talked about how they could use extremely low frequency to control people, to control their minds. And you look at the stuff I just read to you. I mean, forced memory and forced movement of arms and forced speaking and all this kind of stuff. I mean, this is way beyond the MK Ultra program, Catcher in the Rye and LSD, folks. This is far more sophisticated. They've had decades to work on this stuff. And he wrote this book called Mind War in 1980, where he said, right, we can use extremely low frequency on people, get them to do things. And then you remember, I brought this up when we had the Navy Yard shooter, because he was shooting people. He had been complaining about voices in his head, and he carved on the stock of his gun, "This is my ELF weapon, extra low frequency." And when you look at this document that they sent him about psychoelectronic weapon effects, I looked at this at the bottom, and I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting. They break stuff down to get into the auditory cortex, 15 hertz, to get into the visual cortex, 25 hertz. I mean, this is not megahertz, this is hertz. This is not MZ. This is hard to read on this thing. But one of them, 9 hertz. This is extremely low frequency. Anything that is, it has to be 20 hertz or above for you to even hear a bass note. Anything below that, if you hear it, it's just going to be clicks. So yeah. We have multiple data points here, but you're just a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist if you believe their own documents that they put out here.
Hundreds of people in the valley say they are hearing voices in their heads.
Electronic harassment, synthetic telepathy, voice-to-skull technology. Chances are you haven't heard of these terms, but after searching the internet, I found dozens of websites dedicated to the phenomenon.
Gang stalking.
And gang stalking.
Gang stalking, gang stalking, gang stalking, gang stalking.
What's up, guys? Spencer D here. End of August 2017. I just wanted to make a quick video to maybe help people start looking up at these new cell towers they're putting up everywhere. You can't go much more than a mile without seeing a new one. They all seem to be at about, 100, 150 feet high. This one happens to be in my aunt's backyard. From what I hear, they're putting off radiation like you wouldn't believe.
A Team 10 consumer alert tonight. The more we rely on smartphones, the more data we want and the more antennas we need. But at what cost? Workers say they're getting injured working on those antennas, and the constant push for more towers is putting them at risk.
Yeah, there are 600,000 cell phone tower sites in the United States. They're everywhere, on the sides of buildings, street lights, water tanks. But Team 10 learned thousands of those towers violate federal rules that are supposed to keep workers safe.
And it's like inconspicuous, and they just go up overnight. Nobody notices them. Nobody's talking about them. And I've seen guys with their measuring devices out, and these things are putting off mad radiation. Like, it's something that people need to start talking about. Start noticing how often you see these things. They're going up everywhere.
Some more of the symptoms include a sort of hissing in my ear, in particular when I'm in my apartment, but for about 3 days, anywhere I went, it would just sort of come in. I kind of felt like an antenna, and I'd sort of kind of go like, trying to find the place where the hissing or the buzzing stopped. I've not slept in my apartment since last Saturday, so a week ago now, and the buzzing went away after about 3 days, and also the feeling of tingling all over my body slowly started to go away. But I have noticed that whenever I'm in other buildings now or anywhere close to, I don't even know what, because I was never sensitive before. I'm no Luddite. I have computers. I have all the stuff that most of us have, and I've never been sensitive at all. But now wherever I go, I'm feeling the same as I felt in my apartment, feeling dizzy and nauseous and a sort of a metallic taste in my mouth, headache and pressure on my head, and just feeling like I want to sort of faint or throw up.
Newport police tell us they came here to the Marriott a month ago for a harassment call. According to the police report, the man we now know is the Navy Yard shooter said people were following him. He was hearing voices, and they were putting vibrations in his body to keep him awake. Newport police say they responded to the Marriott Hotel early in the morning on August 7th. Aaron Alexis told police he was a naval contractor who traveled often. Alexis told the officer he had a verbal fight with someone at the airport in Virginia as he was getting on a flight to Rhode Island. And that person sent 3 people to follow him and keep him awake by talking to him and sending vibrations into his body. Alexis left a Middletown hotel, went to a Navy base hotel, but still heard the voices. He escaped to a 3rd hotel, the Marriott, but the voices continued. Alexis told the officer the 3 individuals were speaking to him through the floor and using some sort of microwave machine to send vibrations through the ceiling, penetrating his body so he cannot fall asleep. A Newport police sergeant contacted Naval Station Police, which said it would follow up and determine if Alexis was a naval-based contractor. Today, Alexis's employer, The Experts, confirms the 34-year-old information technology employee worked for them for 6 months over the last year, and that his most recent background check and security clearance in June revealed no issues other than 1 minor traffic violation.
The only thing that Wernher von Braun warned about as being more dangerous than this so-called Project Bluebeam or false flag hoaxing an alien attack was the existence of these technologies in the hands of the worst kinds of people, and that they were being abused. That was also had been turned into not just a passive viewing system, but an active weapons system, where you could then turn it around and target people with experiences that are 100% real. One of the interesting ways he put it to me, he says, look, he said, Dr. Greer, if we want to target you so you have a conversation with your personal God, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, whoever, you'll believe it. You'll think it's real. And you will absolutely pass a lie detector test that it is real. It is that good. Now that was 1956. So extrapolate into the 70s, the 90s now, what those capabilities are. Now, the only thing that Wernher von Braun warned about as being more dangerous than this so-called Project Bluebeam or false flag hoaxing an alien attack was the existence of these technologies in the hands of the worst kinds of people and that they were being abused.
Aaron Alexis, we know, had violent outbursts, run-ins with the police, and police now say he also heard voices.
They say 26-year-old Richard Rojas said he was hearing voices and expected to die.
Santiago was undergoing treatment for mental health problems, complaining that he was hearing voices.
22-year-old Klein Thaxton believed he was hearing 3 voices inside his head the day he walked into this downtown office tower. One of them he calls the Crow.